All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lauren Close. I work here at the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub, and we're just about at 2 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off and get us started. So hi, everyone. Again, my name is Lauren Close. I'm with the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub at Columbia University. I am the Operations and Communications Manager, and I'm also a member of the COVID Information Commons project team. So I'd like to introduce you all this afternoon to the COVID Information Commons, or the KIC. And so the KIC is a unique research collaboration that's been brought to you by the Big Data Innovation Hubs. We're also funded by the National Science Foundation's Convergence Accelerator Program. And the KIC brings together scholars from all over the country and around the world to share their research findings in the form of lightning talks. And today, each of our 5 speakers will engage our community directly, answering your questions about their work during a Q&A session at the end of our series of presentations. I should also note that we at the KIC, of course, are committed to providing a supportive and welcoming environment to everyone who works, studies, and interacts with the NEBD Hub community at these public events. So we encourage you to review our code of conduct for online programs. And this code of conduct includes information about conduct reporting and accessibility features. And I've just dropped a link to that in the chat, so please review that at your own leisure. And before I hand you over to today's fantastic group of speakers, I'd like to first introduce our Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub Executive Director, Florence Hudson, who will give you some background on the KIC itself.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you for organizing all of these. You do a wonderful job. And thank you everyone for joining us today. The speakers from around the world. We actually have 3 continents speaking today, if you don't include even others who are going to be participating. And it's wonderful to have all of you with us. The COVID Information Commons was created in 2020 when the U.S. National Science Foundation contacted us at the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub and asked us to work with the other 3 regional innovation big data innovation hubs in the U.S. to create an easy portal for people to use to find COVID-related research information. At the time, the government was funding these rapid awards, which are rapid in, rapid out. You know, they rapidly give you the money if you submit a proposal that's on that is right on point, and then they expect you to rapidly execute, like it's 6 months. And so they contacted us in March of 2020. We were funded in May of 2020. And then we launched the COVID Information Commons portal in July of 2020. At the first event, we had 2 search tools. We had a search mechanism to leverage the NSF search website, and this Lingo4G tool that allows you to look at machine learning clustering. What happened at the event was we expected maybe 25 people to come to our kickoff event in July of 2020. We had over 170. And we had 2 researchers that we asked to present, and there were 40 more researchers who wanted to present. So we said, well, welcome to the COVID Information Commons portal and community. We'll keep doing these webinars and lightning talks until we're done. And we're not done. There's still people that can present. When we first started, it was people talking about the research that they plan to do. Now people are talking about the results of that research and the longitudinal view and sustainability of what they've done and how it can inform today and the future. So you'll hear a lot about that from our presenters today. The KIC was originally funded by the Convergence Accelerator in 2020, and then we got this extension award from the Convergence Accelerator, which became the Technology Innovation and Partnership group at NSF. And what they basically said was, you know, we grew it from like 32 NSF Rapid Awards related to COVID when they first contacted us to over 700. And then we said, you know, it is a disease, COVID. We really should be working with NIH as well. And so they asked us if they gave us $2 million, if we could do this for 4 more years and work with NIH as well. So we were awarded, and we're very grateful for this COVID Information Commons Extension Award. And that goes through September of 2025. And that has allowed us to do all sorts of great things. We now have over 10,000 awards listed in the COVID Information Commons Award and PI database or researcher database. We also have this Lingo 4G tool that allows you to see machine learning clustering of the awards in the database. And this is an example of one of the maps that you can see. And there's also a faceted map that you can see, which Lauren has on the next page, leveraging this software called Lingo 4G out of Carrot Search in Poland that we use as a base for this, and it clusters the content. You can then put in a query like, say, epidemiology, and it'll return 367 of the 10,000 awards to say these are the ones in this area. You can then click on any of them and then see the award information on the right. You can look at the institution awarded. You can look at the name of the principal investigator, so you can contact them. There's contact information. So it really helped us grow it. It helped us grow in other ways too that Lauren will talk more about, including well, I guess I can talk about it, but Emily's going to do this. But we also ended up taking all of the research lightning talks, like the ones that are happening today, and Lauren led a team that actually transcribed them into written English and translated them into Spanish with the help of bilingual students, which is really wonderful. So there's a lot that's been going on with the KIC extension, and now we're talking about what we're going to be doing over the next 2 years through the rest of the award, and so we can talk more about that later. So Lauren, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Florence. That's actually a fantastic transition, because I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Emily, who wants to chat with you just for a second about one of our current ongoing projects at the COVID Info Commons, the Student Paper Challenge.
Sure. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Florence. So if you're interested in the pandemic, COVID recovery, health insights, or future innovations and discoveries, then the 2023 KIC Student Paper Challenge is definitely for you. We welcome you to synthesize research on a topic of your choice or leverage previous research that you've completed and display your methodologies and findings in a 4 to 5 page paper format. This challenge is open to higher ed and recently graduated students within the past 12 months from around the world. And we have some exciting new news regarding this challenge since our last KIC webinar. The KIC is now offering prizes to the top 3 winners of the undergraduate and community college student cohort and the graduate student cohort, including $400 for first place, $300 for second place, and $200 for third place. And we've also extended the submission deadline for this challenge to Monday, August 14th by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. So you all still have time to participate and submit a paper for judging. Graduate students, researchers, professors, and professionals are also invited to participate as judges for this challenge. So we welcome you all to join. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. And I'm going to make one last announcement to the group before we get to the main event, which is the presentations this afternoon. We actually have 2 working groups for the COVID Information Commons. The one that you can see here is a student working group, which is spearheaded by 2 of our work studies. And the student working group has over 150 members. We meet on a regular basis, and this includes members from all over the world, the US and beyond. So this is a really wonderful international collaboration space for STEM students who are interested in working together on data science projects related to COVID-19 and pandemic research broadly. So the next session is next Friday, August 4th at 11 a.m. Eastern. So we hope to see some of you or maybe some of your students in that session. You can find information about the working group at the links that are shown here on the slide, but I will, of course, in good measure, send them all to you in the chat as well. On that same note, we actually also have a researcher working group as the KIC. So our members are from, again, 58 different organizations. We're spread across 29 US states, 3 other territories and countries. So this is a really exciting collaborative space as well. And we hope that you, our professional researchers, will consider joining us for our next meeting, which is going to be coming up on Wednesday, August 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern. To get a calendar invite for this meeting, you can also just email me directly. I'll drop all of these details in the chat as well. So again, as you can see from all of the different things that Florence and Emily and I have been discussing, there are lots of different opportunities at the KIC, and we're just excited to be able to offer you all these great collaborative spaces for researchers in this space. But without further ado, I want to now turn it over to our main event for today. These are our speakers for today's KIC webinar. We'll be hearing from 5 fantastic researchers. We have presenters coming to us from all around the world today, including Spain, South Africa. Some of our presenters are faculty at major US and international universities. Some work in the administration, and some are actually students who are with us because of their research using the COVID Information Commons resources. So it's a great, diverse panel for today. And if you have any questions for our speakers during those presentations, you can either choose to drop them directly into the chat, or if you think that there may be the spark for a different conversation or a more full conversation, just hold on to those questions for our live Q&A session at the end of each of these 5 presentations. But I will stop talking now, and I would love to kick off this afternoon's webinar by introducing you to our first speaker. This is Carlos Badenes-Olmedo, who's an assistant professor at the University Politécnica of Madrid. And today he will be sharing with us his research on COVID-19 and knowledge graphs. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Carlos kick off our presentations for today.
Okay, thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Florence, for inviting me. Okay, I'm going to share the screen. Yeah, so, okay, so thank you for inviting me to participate in this webinar. So I am Carlos Badenes-Olmedo. I am a researcher from the Ontology Engineering Group and also an assistant professor in the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. And I'm going to present the Drugs for COVID project. It's a project that we propose to create a knowledge graph. This is trying to represent the drugs that we used during the pandemic to define the clinical control of the coronavirus. So the idea is that during the COVID-19 pandemic, some worldwide institutions try to identify or to create data sets with scientific research articles that are related to coronavirus. This kind of information could be useful for hospital pharmacies, for clinical practitioners. So our research group, the Ontology Engineering Group, trying to promote how can we retrieve information, retrieve knowledge from this kind of data. So the first step was to identify what is the most important data set that we can use. In this case, from the European Union was provided the COVID-19 European Data Portal, also the lead COVID dataset, and mainly the COVID-19 Open Research dataset was the most important dataset that combines information from the PubMed, bioRxiv, medRxiv, and archive information, also combine information from the World Health Organization, and provide more than 400,000 articles that we thought that we can leverage to provide knowledge. So combining this kind of knowledge with the health service from Madrid, the SERMAS, we provide the mechanisms to create knowledge graph that we can exploit and provide knowledge from this kind of people. So first of all, we define a workflow with different steps that we provide, not only the step, but also the recommendations, the steps that you can follow to create finally a knowledge graph and also facilitate the exploitations. So we define a 6-step workflow. The first step is the harvesting. In this step, the idea is that you need to identify the data set that is related to coronavirus, wait if the data is completely available or not. The second step is the preprocessing, because you need to organize the data that is provided in this case of data set, because this data is unstructured, because we are working with tests. So we need to modelize an unstructured way of the data and then move to the third step, which is information extraction. In this step, we need to discover the main elements of this kind of data that we can use to create the knowledge graph. In our case, the main elements are the biomedical concepts, for example, the drugs, the diseases, and the genetic information. And then we need to define a formal description of the domain, which is the fourth step, which is the semantification. In this case, we need to create an ontology to define the relations between the biomedical concepts and to define all the concepts, all the elements that finally appear in the knowledge graph. The next step is the knowledge graph generation. In this step, we need to define the rules to create the instances in the knowledge graph. And finally, we can provide the mechanisms to exploit, to facilitate the use of the information that the knowledge graph contains. So focus on the first step. The objective is to identify the relevant data sources and also to evaluate the availability of the data. Our proposal is that you need to perform a systematic literature review, taking into account the main concepts of the coronavirus, and then define the data set, for example, from digital repositories, PubMed, bioRxiv, and so on, but also combining with other sources, for example, clinical collections from the coordinating corpus, the lead COVID dataset, and also additional resources, for example, patents, encyclopedic articles from Wikipedia, and all this data is organized in this first step. In the next step, we need to transform this unstructured data, which are the tests, into tables, into unstructured data. Then the methodology that we propose is to identify the minimal information unit. The most easy way to transform text into a structured way is to define the full text of the article as the data. In our opinion, this is not the best way to do that. And our proposal is to define as minimal information unit the paragraph of the articles, because in that area, you can discover all the references or the relation between the biomedical concepts. Then the next step is the information extraction. In this case, the idea is to create annotations based on that paragraphs that discover drugs, diseases, and genetic information. In our experience, we fine-tune different language models for each different biomedical concepts. So the idea is that you need to define a specific language model to identify drugs and also to normalize the drugs according to different vocabularies, because in different countries, we have using different standard codes. So once we have the annotations with the entities and also the codes, we can define the formal space to describe all this information. This is the step that we need to create an ontology. In the biomedical domain, exists a lot of ontologies. So the idea is not to create from scratch an ontology. The idea is to reuse existing ontologies and to provide the missing information in the new ontology. In our case, the ontology, the ontology was evoca, and in our case, the missing information was to provide the evidence that support the relations between drugs, between diseases, and between genetic information. So in our case, we use the Unified Medical Language System and also this DISNet platform to all this information is combined and also provide, this is the purple area, the information about the evidence. And which is the evidence? The evidence is the paragraph where the relation between this element is supported in the scientific article. Once we have defined the formal domain, the ontology, we need to identify the instances, the claims, the statements retrieved from the scientific articles to create instances in the knowledge graph. This is the knowledge graph generation step. So our methodology is proposed to create rules to identify, using the previous model language, the entities and also the relations between them. Finally, once we have the ontology, we have the instances, we are able to identify the nodes in the graph. For example, the blue ones are the elements, the orange ones are the relations between them, and the purple ones are the evidence that support this kind of relations. The evidence is the minimal information unit, which is the paragraph, and also the articles. Once we have the knowledge graph, finally, we are able to facilitate the exploitation of the information. The first step is, of course, we can use Sparkle queries. Is a specific language model that you can create queries to exploit the language, the knowledge graph, but this requires an expert in this kind of domain. So our second methodology is to create a question answering interface that provide the information not only from the knowledge graph, but also combining from external sources, from others knowledge graph, from others document connections, and then support question in natural language to provide answers also in natural language. So our platform is the Dart for COVID platform. So all this kind of information is publicly available. The knowledge graph, the models, the dataset, and also the services are, these resources are completely free, are completely public, and these are available from these URLs. So thanks for your attention, and I'm able to answer any question that you have.
Thank you so much, Rose. That was great. I'm sure we're going to get lots of questions from the audience about your presentation. Thank you so much. And I want to hand it over to our next speaker, New Gao, who's with the Public Policy Institute of California, and New will talk about her research on COVID-19 and education impacts.
Sorry, forgot to unmute myself. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you again for having me. My name is Nu Gao, and I'm with the Public Policy Institute of California. In the next 10 minutes or so, I will be presenting some of the key findings from our recent work looking at the impact of COVID-19 on science education. And this is joint work with Kathy Dorena from Wested and Maria Changfei, who's a doctoral student at UC Davis. So recently, if you open up a newspaper, you may see some major headlines talking about the test score declines. And as you read through those articles, you notice that, there has been some really dramatic test score declines. But then most of the articles are talking about the test score declines in math or ELA, English Language Arts. So far, there has been very little evidence talking about or studies looking at how the pandemic has really affected science education. And we all know that even before the pandemic, science had taken the backseat to math and English language arts. So because of the lack of prioritization, we think the pandemic's impact might be more dramatic. So in this study, we're trying to fill this research gap, and we're hoping to achieve 4 goals, and each goal would correspond to one research question. So the first goal, we're trying to understand what are some of the impact of the COVID-19 on science education. And in the second goal, we're trying to understand some of the challenges facing high-need districts, and those are districts that serve a large share of low-income students, English learners, and also foster youth students. In the third goal, we're trying to understand or explore districts' plans to support science recovery. So for example, what are some of the common strategies and also programs have those districts developed or adopted to help students recover from the pandemic? And the last part, we're trying to identify what are some of the policy levers we can actually leverage in order to support a more equitable science recovery. And in this study, we're using the data for this study are coming from 3 primary data sources. The first one is in the fall of 2021, we launched a statewide survey of school districts. And in the survey, we asked them about, how does COVID-19 really affect your operation and also your programming for science education? And in California, we have about 1,000 districts, and those districts serves about 6 million students. And in our survey response, we got about 200 districts responded, and those districts in total served about half of the K-12 student population. We all know that nationwide, there has been a very dramatic decline in survey response rate due to COVID-19. So even though 230 doesn't look like a lot, but we're pretty happy with the results. And importantly, there's no significant difference in terms of the district characteristics. So for example, high need or poor districts were just as likely to respond to the survey. And most of the difference are coming from district size or locale. So for example, rural districts, which tend to be smaller, they were less likely to respond to the survey. And we know this has been true even before the pandemic. The second piece of data are coming from districts' annual accountability accountability documents. Those are called the local control accountability plans. So all of districts were required to develop and also post their plans on their website. So we were able to obtain about close to 900 plans, and those plans, they include a lot of details about what districts are trying to do, and also the types of programs, and also services they're providing to students. And the last piece of information is the semi-structured interviews with educational partners. So we talked to nearly all of the county offices of education's regional leads for science. We also interviewed a sample of high-need districts, and also some of the districts who were really leaders in terms of implementing the state's new science standards, also called the California Next Generation Science Standards. And last, we also interviewed about 15 statewide organizations and also statewide policymakers. And so in the next few slides, I will just walk you through some of the key findings. And let me just start with some more encouraging news. So in 2013, almost 10 years ago, California adopted a new science standards. Those are called the Next Generation Science Standards, or NGSS. So if implemented well, NGSS has the potential of transforming science teaching and learning. And in 2016, we did an initial study looking at districts' implementation. And back then, you can see that 78% of the districts said they were in the implementation phase as defined by the state. So in our recent survey, we asked them, before the pandemic, which phase were you in? And you can see that 94% of the districts said, they were in the implementation phase. So over time, the NGSS implementation was progressing, which is really encouraging. But then there came the pandemic, which pretty much derailed science education. So in our survey, we asked districts, compared to pre-pandemic, to what extent has science education become a higher priority, lower priority, or stayed about the same priority. And in this chart, you can see that, 62% of districts said, science had become an even lower priority compared to before the pandemic. And there's not much variation across districts. And the only interesting thing we're seeing here is the urban-rural divide. So to the right of this slide, you will see the breakdown for rural districts. So about half, or close to half, or 47% of the rural districts said, science stayed as about the same priority, which is great. And fewer of them said science became a priority compared to statewide. And interestingly, about 13% of the rural districts said science actually became a higher priority. So we did some interviews with some rural counties and districts. So they basically said, because the remote location and also the lower population density, they were actually able to reopen much earlier. So as a background, in California, the vast majority of students spent the entire 2020-21 school year online. So for some rural districts, one of the rural districts we talked to, they actually only closed for about 2 weeks, and then they were able to bring students back right away. And also because in rural areas, there's ample outdoor space. So we've seen some of the rural districts getting really innovative. They started doing a lot of science expedition and also science summer camps, trying to prioritize, science education. And another way that COVID-19 has really derailed science education is that during the time of crisis, districts provided very limited support for science education. And in this figure, what we're showing here is some of the very commonly used or evidence-based strategies to help students learn. And the green bars we're showing is the share of districts that are providing those kind of supports for math or English language arts. And the orange bars are the numbers for science. And you can see that, just scanning through the chart, you see that fewer districts actually provided support for science education. And one of the things I will highlight is the small group instruction, or the high dosage tutoring. It was, so this one was considered as one of the best, if not the best, strategies to help students recover. But we found that only 25% of the districts were actually providing this kind of service for science education. And last, in our survey, we also asked districts looking ahead to what extent do you plan, to prioritize math, ELA, or science in your recovery plans? And so this chart summarizes the findings. So overall, you can see that over 80% of districts said math or ELA is a high priority in their recovery plans. But when you look at the science, it's just really heartbreaking. Only 27% of the districts said, science, is a priority in their recovery plans. And we're also seeing that 40% of districts said, science is a low priority or not a priority at all. So all of this taken together is really showing a very dramatic impact of pandemic on science education. It also points to a very long recovery ahead, given the lack of prioritization in science education. So this is the end of some of the of my presentation, and you may find more additional results and also analysis in our report together with our policy recommendation. Thank you all again, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A later.
Thank you so much, Nia. This is great. I want to next turn us over to our next speaker, who's Hong Jin of the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga's College of Engineering and Computer Science.
Hi, my name is Hong Jin. I'm a faculty at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. So this talk is about a project I was fortunate to work on with a large team of colleagues from North Carolina A&T, Spelman College, Catholic University of America. Those are the on paper, but in reality, there are many, many more collaboration. We probably have now more than a dozen team have been working on this. So this is a National Science Foundation supported project. It's called a PIPP Phase 1. My goal is to develop AI-based framework to predict and prevent future coronavirus pandemic. Although we say it's coronavirus, but the model now has proceeded to be generalizable to presumably many other viral pandemic. So, oops, my apologies. Oh, okay, no problem. So this is the okay, it's automatically forwarding. My apologies. Okay, so this is the kind of overview of we proposed in the beginning. Although we have made a lot of modification right now. But here's the idea is still the same. So we propose how do we predict the virus and new virus pandemic. So our idea is first we generate all the possible SARS-CoV-X from the readable based on recombination patterns or habitat change, and then we predict those potential SARS-CoV-X. Now, here's the challenge. It's easier to generate those sequences, but how do we know which one actually will become virulent or transmit in a human population? That's really the key here. So we turn to AI. So you may say AI is a black box. Well, in this case, it's probably also a blessing because we really don't know how a virus jump from host from the animal readable to human and become virulent. So AI is a black box, but it's probably a great tool we can use, even though it may be a black box. So that's my argument here. So my apology, I have to block off because we are my university is applying for a patent based on the funding of this. So the goal is here we have input sequences. This is just primary nucleotide sequences. From those sequences, we'll do feature engineering, generate some helpful features, and then we use the sequence feature to feed into an AI model. And based on our AI model, we'll predict the fitness. And we, given the recent advance of AI, we can also use the AlphaFold, molecular dynamic simulation, or even experimental methods to verify some candidate gene as the potential drivers for those virulence change. Given the AI model, we can also generalize this, basically use transfer learning from coronaviruses, presumably to other viruses such as influenza, HIV, HPV. There's many viral variants. Sorry, I'm not actually really not expert in biology. I'm just computer science. So the challenge we are really dealing with, my apologies, it's automatically forwarding again. So the challenge is really to predict pathogenicity from sequences. And we can also find out potential rule and test the generability by transfer learning, predict the viral future viruses, and predict the outcome. It will be AI-enabled early warning system. I'm so sorry. And we want to use AI to predict vaccine development. And given that we know how the virulence variants change, so that's the big picture of this. So, and here's some results we have developed or have accomplished. And this is estimation of the viral fitness based on the information of the data we have. This is actually for Omicron subvariants. So, and we can compare the Omicron variant using a method we develop a pairwise comparison. Then we can estimate the relative difference between those variants. And based on this data, we can generate a so-called viral fitness landscape. And for those who are aware of the evolution, in evolution, there's a so-called fitness landscape, and there's really a lot of argument about that, but there's also a lot of theory based on the evolution landscape of fitness. And with the fitness landscape of potential virus, we could, in theory, predict its evolution trajectory. So this is a recurrent. We have a method can do this, and this is the estimated result for the alpha, beta, delta, Omicron subvariants in the USA. We are also in the process of applying this to influenza or smallpox. We don't have enough data for smallpox or other viruses, but influenza seems to be a promising. So those are this is a significant funding of this our current project. Here's some more results without diverging too much detail into the AI model we have developed. And there's really a lot of parameters, but the accuracy, current model can achieve quite a high accuracy. Well, of course, this is based on what we know. The challenge is really about the unknown. Yeah? So even though we are predicting unknown, but the data is already known. So in machine learning, we basically split that into training and testing. So the challenging about predict unknown is still remain an open question currently. Yeah. And some people may argue, well, why do we have to do deep learning? There is a lot of statistical, genetic, genomics, quantitative treat. There are so many other methods, and why we even have to turn into deep learning. And here we have some results to show deep learning, at the minimum, it detects different signature from the standard genome-wide association study. So on the left is a result from our deep learning result. And this is actually based on the WHO labeled virulent alpha, beta, delta, Omicron, others. And we want to see what signature in the SARS-CoV-2 genome are important to contribute to those increase of virulence. And those high signals, you can see that at the end of the SARS-CoV-2 genome. And around this region, I'm highlighting trying to between 20,000 to 25,000. That's the spike gene, which WHO and most of the immune response will be reacted to. And that's based on the conventional knowledge, that should be, in fact, that's how WHO classified the SARS-CoV-2 variant. But surprisingly, AI model pick up those signals, but those are not the strongest signal, and they pick up many other signals, and some of the stronger signals are not there. And by using conventional statistical genomic method like genome-wide association study, and that still pick the spike gene as the stronger the signal. There are some other, but not very strong. So in this case, the AI and the conventional statistical method pick at the minimum gave different weight to those signals. So so this is it's surprising and also reassuring in a way. And so we picked the conventional wisdom, the spike gene, but we also picked some other signals, which may or may not be verified by the experimental method. But how do we predict? How do we verify this, right? So I mean, we use AI to predict many things, and we know AI can generate a lot of false predictions. So in this case, how do we verify it? So yes, that's quite challenging. So we are trying in general, two different ways. One is to generate a model experimental system to verify the findings. We have our team using biological model. This is a Saccharomyces cerevisiae. We also have a cell line system to convert those genes into the live cell and measure their relative activities. And then we also have a computational person to perform molecular dynamics to simulate how those mutations affect candidate gene, their activity. In this case, it's ACE2 and RBD, but we also have other candidate gene which predict which in different regions how they react with the human the genes potential targeting in the human system, human immune system. So we also organize workshop and expert panel to discuss how to design trustworthy AI to promote social trust in AI or equity in equitable AI. And the COVID-19 has shown there's high disparity in our current system. So we use AI to predict future pandemic. It can easily amplify the hidden disparity in our current system, or probably in our current data as well. So we recognize this, and we organize a quite diverse panel, and including people from South Africa, I think Kenya. There's a person from Europe, and across the with different backgrounds like lawyers, physicians, policymakers, governmental NIST, governmental agencies, to have all kind of perspective of how to promote AI, how to promote trust in AI in historical marginalized communities. So we also emphasize a lot of workforce development, given our collaborator in minority serving institution, including Spelman College, North Carolina A&T, Catholic University of America, which contains a lot of Hispanic students, and my home institution, University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. We also collaborate with the hospital system, Global Source for AI. And so lastly, thanks to INSF, UTC, and the AI Tennessee Initiative for the support of this grant. And lastly, I didn't put in the slides, INSF has released call for the phase 2 application for National Center, not to be a a scale probably 10 times bigger, if not 100 times bigger. So I'm looking for collaborator, especially with community engagement, public policy. I heard someone working on public policy. I wish to connect after this. So I'll just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Hong. Yes, this is the perfect venue for us to introduce speakers and researchers to one another. It always makes us smile when we have that opportunity. So thank you for making our day. And with that, I want to turn us over to our next speaker for today, Evelyn Zhu, who's at the University of South Africa. Evelyn is actually one of our winners from the 2022 COVID Info Commons Student Paper Challenge, and we're so thrilled to be able to feature her research on machine learning and equity markets in South Africa in this webinar. So Evelyn, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lorraine, and greetings to you all. As said, my name is Evelyn Zhu, a financial management student from the University of South Africa. The title of my research is Advances in Machine Learning Explainability to Contextualize Equity Market Sustainability in South Africa during the COVID-19 era. For this presentation, I will start by looking at the research objectives, methodology, results analysis, then go on to conclusions and future research, then end by acknowledgements. As a financial management student, I was so fascinated in trying to understand and assess the impact of COVID-19, and the easier way was to look at the stock markets. Therefore, I looked at the Johannesburg stock market, which is the largest stock market in the African continent. We do have a number of, 353 companies listed at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, but for someone to quickly have a glimpse of what really transpires at the JSE, one needs to look at what we call the Johannesburg top 40 listed companies, because by just assessing the top 40 listed companies, they constitute more than 80% of the market capitalization. Therefore, it will be easier to really see what really happens at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So the first objective for this research was to employ a regression and machine learning algorithm to assess sustainability effects attributable to the impact of COVID-19 on the stock returns of the JSE top 40 listed companies, which for this year, 2023, was coming up from the 8 industries, although we do have 10 industries in general. Then another objective was to examine the interpretability and robustness of machine learning in trying to estimate by implicating explainable artificial intelligence. For data collection, I managed to find the closing stock prices for the JSE top 40 listed companies, and the data was from January 2017 to September 2022. After gathering data, I ran 40 OLS regression models and analyzed the results. Then I managed to run 40 machine learning models, then did post hoc analysis using Shapley values. And for global interpretability, I did use Sharp heat maps, then tried to review and I explain the results. I had quite a number of independent variables, that is Johannesburg top 40 index, South African volatility index, COVID index, sustainability indices, that is environmental, social, and governance. The parameter settings were data transformation was standardized 1, training was 33% of observations, validation 67% of the observations, radius was set at 1, then the error minimization rule was the GCV. Using the Akaike information criterion and mean squared error, the best 3 models, which were for the 3 sectors, basic materials, financial services, and consumer services industries were selected. And these companies are Anglo Gold Ashanti, ANG, which is the 3rd largest gold mining company in the world, measured by production. I did select financial services industry. There is Standard Bank, which is one of the largest financial services group in South Africa, and it is Africa's leading lender in terms of assets. I did select Clicks for the consumer services industry. This is the leading farmers and part of the healthcare group, which is part of the consumer services industry. Looking at my results, OLS and REN results produce identical parameter settings, except for Standard Bank, which is a financial services company. For Standard Bank, during COVID, this can be attributed to this negative sign parameter for COVID on Standard Bank, it can be attributed to the fact that during COVID pandemic, not necessarily Standard Bank alone, but most of the financial services companies started offering relief services, that is in terms of ATM cash withdrawal fees, monthly fees to their clients. And also they did waiver in terms of and relief in terms of home loan, student loans, and other financial portfolios. For Anglo, Gold, Ashanti, and Clicks, the returns were influenced positively by COVID-19. And this can be attributed to the fact that during times of crisis and pandemic like COVID-19, most of the basic materials companies, since they trade with precious metals, people tend to prefer and buy shares in companies which deals with precious materials most of the times. Then for Clicks, it was a consumer services provider, which was declared to be an essential service provider. So they were not really impacted by COVID-19, the companies in that industry, because they were operating full-time and people always buy consumer services goods, so they were not really closed. For markets, that is for JTOP, another variable there, the OLS results implicated a positive result relationship, whereas the machine learning model had a negative relationship with the stock returns of these particular companies. For South African Volatility Index, normally the financial theory postulates an inverse equity price volatility relationship, yet exception was for Standard Bank, a financial services provider. For sustainability, OLS and RAND results had mixed parameters. Most of the companies from the basic materials industry were impacted severely by the governance index, because most of those companies were not allowed to operate because they were not declared to be essential service providers. Whereas for financial services industry companies, they were allowed to operate, so they were impacted by the social index, unlike the basic materials companies. For Clicks and other consumer services, it was environmental indices which had quite significant impact on the stock returns of these particular companies. These graphs are for Clicks, a pharmaceutical company, to just give you a clear picture of the OLS and the difference between OLS regression and K4-RAN, that is machine learning models. As you can see from these graphs, the precision of the K4-RAN machine learning model is quite precise and amazing compared to that of OLS. To the right, I do have a network chart with the red lines showing the features which had negative impacts on the stock returns of Clicks. Then the gray lines are showing the features which had positive impact on the stock returns of this particular company. Moving on, these are sharp heat maps for the selected 3 companies, the best performing 3 companies in 3 different industries: Anglo Gold, Ashanti, Standard Bank, and Clicks. The blue line is showing the start of COVID-19, and the black bars to the end of each graph are showing the overall contribution of that feature to the stock returns of these particular companies. For Anglo Gold Ashanti, as we can see, COVID, precious metal index, and JTOP are the variables, are the features which had quite significant impact on the stock returns of this particular company. For Standard Bank, a financial service provider, South African Volatility Index, social and environmental indices are the features which had significant impact on the stock returns of this particular company. For Clicks, the company at the far right, the precious metal ratio, South African Volatility Index, and COVID are the features which had quite a significant impact on the stock returns of this particular company. They were not really affected the same, but it was different across the industries. So what I can say is the conclusion from my research is that performance of complex stock market models based on traditional and parametric statistical method is very weak when applied to developing economies like South Africa and Africa in general. So it will be best for researchers and policymakers to use novel machine learning models in trying to develop and produce reliable, explainable results when applied to market instruments. Then for future research, it will be really crucial to use advanced machine learning techniques like deep learning and gradient boosting to compare and contrast results to identify the best performing algorithm for stock market predictability, and also to increase the accuracy of the expected rate of return predictions for traded instruments and stock indices that relies on machine learning will be really encouraged. I just want to end by acknowledging and giving a special thanks to my academic mentors in Professor Gordon Dash and Professor Nina Kajiji, who are both from the University of Rhode Island, United States. And I also want to extend my deepest appreciation to the NKD group, which provided me with access to WinORS software package, which I used in conducting this research. I just want to end, these are some of the references which I used for this particular presentation. And with this, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. That was really fantastic. That's wonderful. We're so happy to be able to feature you. And also our final speaker for today, Jen, who is a graduate student at the University of Florida. Jen is also a former researcher who was a winner with us at the COVID Information Commons Student Paper Challenge. So we're just very excited to be able to highlight the work of these exceptional students. So today, Jen, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thanks for having me. My name is, can you see the screen, right? My name is Shinza. I'm now a PhD candidate in the Department of Industrial and Systems Engineering at the University of Florida. And this is a joint work with Dr. Hall, Dr. Hallidish, and Dr. Shen in multiple departments at the University of Florida. And today, I'm going to share our work about data-driven adaptive testing resource allocation strategies for real-time monitoring of infectious diseases. As everybody is known that infectious diseases, including the COVID-19 pandemic, have continued to be a major global public health threat due to the increasing cost of healthcare and the cost of the death. And it is very critical for us to detect the disease outbreaks as early as possible to support timely implementation of public health interventions and to contain the rapid spread of the infectious diseases at the early stage. And we know that mass testing is key to tracking the spread of pandemic based on the diagnostic tests. But the challenge is that the testing availability is limited, especially at the early stage of a novel infectious disease. And it will lead to insufficient testing data. And the insufficient testing data will impede our analysis of the spread of infectious diseases and also impede the effective monitoring of the infectious diseases. So these were, in the current literature, there are so many works about the modeling and monitoring methods in epidemiology to monitor the infectious diseases. But unfortunately, they are not handling the inadequate data, so the models are unreliable. And to deal with a limited testing availability, there are a lot of pool testing strategies to handle it, to increase the overall testing efficiency. But it will incur increased reporting delays and lower testing sensitivity, and it will impede our real-time monitoring. So in this work, we are focused on individual diagnostic tests. And there are also many works about the resource allocation strategies to help us implement the test allocation, like many MAB, multi-armed bandit MAB techniques. But all these methods are applicational agnostic. How to integrate these techniques into our problem is still challenging. So in this work, our goal is to integrate some physical information with the insufficient testing data to help us to properly characterize the spatial and temporal transmission patterns of infectious diseases. And based on that, we will develop our data-driven test allocation strategies for quick disease outbreak detection. And here is an overview of our proposed methodology. Our first step is to collect the testing data based on the diagnostic tests allocated. And in this work, we are focusing on updates the test allocation based on the geographic unit of census block groups. And within each block groups, we assume the random sampling. And after we collect all the testing data from all the block groups, we will combine these testing data, though limited, with the physical information to assess the appropriate health risks. And we will combine physical information associated with the transmission dynamics and the health disparity of infectious diseases. The transmission pattern, the transmission dynamics will help us to identify the positive cases, and the health disparity will help us to pay more attention to the vulnerable population groups. And after we assess the health risks, we will update our test allocation. And along the time, we will also it will also help us to detect the possible disease outbreaks. And along the time, we will do these steps iteratively. And first of all, I would like to introduce our physics-informed model. We model the infection risks using the Bayesian framework. And to account for the future change, we will also model the prospective infection risk using a symmetric transmission matrix. Here, the transmission matrix is decomposed into two patterns. One is about the local transmission patterns, and another one is imported transmission patterns. The first one, a local transmission pattern, will characterize the transmission within each group. And it will characterize by the local contagion risk scores. And for the imported transmission patterns, it will characterize the transmission among all the groups. So it will be characterized by the connected scores. And all these scores will be evaluated by some associated factors that will lead to the spread of the infectious diseases. And for the possible factors, I will introduce them in a few slides. And apart from the infection risks, we also account for the severity risk measures that will, which is intuitive that the population groups that will be at the higher risk of getting severely infected will definitely be drawn more attention. And similarly, it will be characterized by a disease severity risk score. And for this part, it can account for the health disparity measure. And by combining these two risks, the infection risk and the severity risk, we will assess the risk levels for each group. And by using this, we will update our test allocation. The basic idea is to balance between the exploitation and exploration. That is, we will allocate more tests to the block groups that at the highest risk levels. And also, we will allocate more tests to the block groups that lacks the tests. So their risk levels will be of the high uncertainty. So balancing these two, we will intelligently update our limited tests. Apart from these informative states, we will also update the allocation proportional to the population, which is intuitive because the groups that has a larger population will definitely be allocated more tests, even they have the same risks. After that, we will simultaneously monitor the infection rates over all the groups. The basic steps is where we first estimate the risks and then diagnose the most suspected the block groups that at the highest risk, and then update our monitoring statistic and then guide our detection decision. We have done some simulation motivated by the COVID-19 pandemic in North Central Florida, which including nearly 600 block groups. And here is how we evaluate the scores, the three types of scores in our physics-informed model, which is pre-evaluated based on the medical geographic analysis. we use the population density and the community infection risks to characterize the local contagion risk, measuring the neighborhood contagion risk within each group. And we use the point distance and the stay-at-home rate, which is a proxy, the proxy factor for mobility score, which will measure how frequently the two groups interact. And also we use the ADI, the Aerial Deprivation Index, which indicates the socioeconomic deprivation in a geographic area to measure the severity risk. And all this data, all these factors are publicly ready and available. In the simulation, we generate 3 different transmission cases regarding different social distancing adherence. When there is very limited adherence, and in the case when the positive rate will go into will reach a steady state, and in the case that there will be a second wave, and we will evaluate our method regarding different perspective of the performance. Regarding the model estimation, the calibration of our physics-informed model, we can say that regarding the accuracy and the convergence, the estimation is pretty good. And for our allocation, we compared it with some competing algorithm, and we find out that compared to other algorithms, our method can achieve robust and overall robust and the satisfactory performance regarding the number of the positive cases. And for the monitoring part, the performance is generally consistent with our allocation performance, which is intuitive because better allocation performance will lead us to collect higher quality testing data. And based on higher quality testing data, we can project the transmission patterns better, and then we can detect the outbreaks in an effective way. So our proposed method can achieve the shortest detection delay in detecting the disease outbreaks. So in summary, we develop a data-driven test allocation strategies, and by leveraging the physical information into model with the limited testing data to properly project and describe the spatial and transmission patterns. So based on this, we can use this for quickly detecting the disease outbreaks. And we also investigate our method from the methodology, from a theoretical and empirical way, to guarantee the capability of the allocation and the monitoring. That is end of my presentation, and I'm open to your questions and comments. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Jen. I want to conclude this series of presentations by thanking all of you for sharing your research with us for today. And I'm going to briefly say to our audience, sharing my screen, that all of our speakers' presentations will be made available through our website and on our YouTube channel later this week. I'll be working on written transcripts in English and Spanish with the support of our students as part of our accessibility and Spanish language resources initiative. So you can find copies of all these and previous lightning talks on our website via the link that I'm about to share with you in the chat. And before we segue into the Q&A session of today's webinar, I'd also like to briefly plug all the ways that you can continue to stay in touch with the COVID Information Commons. So you can find us on our website, you can subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on what currently is called Twitter, Instagram, Slack, or LinkedIn. And if you have any questions or suggestions for our events, you can always email us. And I'll be sharing these links in the chat as well. So please peruse at your own pace. Keep an eye out for communications from us about our upcoming events and activities. And with that admin out of the way, I'm going to open it up to Q&A from our audience. And I'm going to pass the mic over to our executive director and moderator, Florence Hudson, to handle today's Q&A session.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you for all the presentations. I love how I get to learn so much every time we do one of these from so many different facets. So thank you so much for sharing all your insight. Before I go into some of the questions that came up in my mind, are there any of the participants or presenters that would like to ask any questions? Okay, then I'll jump in, but you can jump in anytime. I grew up in a family where we always jump into each other's conversations, so I'm very comfortable with that. Just let us know. Carlos, first your work, which we found fascinating. We actually found your work in the NIH National Library of Medicine, but I noticed that you have some different type of funding, where you are in Spain. So I was wondering if you could share that a little bit with the participants and the researchers, because I'm wondering if that could be informational for us for the future too, for different types of sources.
Okay, so this project was financed by the Fundación BBVA, which is a bank here in Nacional in Spain. And this is a grant that is conceded only for 2 years during the pandemic, and for projects that trying to apply artificial intelligence to improve or to create solutions, urgent solutions for this kind of problems. So in our case, the grant was provided only to create the knowledge graph and also to create all the resources that, of course, should be publicly available. So
that's wonderful.
Crucial. This grant was crucial for our project.
Oh, absolutely, and very timely. And as I was listening to your work, everyone's talking about LLMs now, right? Knowledge graphs we've been talking about for a while now. Everybody knows about LLMs. People who didn't even know that the idea existed before. So as you think about or teach us about what you've created, do you consider it a large language model, or could it grow up to be a large language model? Or, and what do you see it being longitudinally? Could this be something that could be used over time and referred back to, for future COVID or other pandemic or disease related situations?
Yeah, the idea to use the language model was to not only identify the elements. Of course, we can use BERT, but also we can use JAMA or whatever. So the idea to normalize the mentions, because trying to discover this knowledge from different sources, for example, from scientific articles from the United States, but also from notes from here, from Spain. So there are names from the same principal substance that is different because the brand name is different. So trying to incorporate the normalization to the identification process in the language model is crucial. So in our case, in the future, maybe we can not only use language model, but also provide inverted index or whatever other approach to normalize all the knowledge and also to create the instances in the knowledge graph. So probably in the future, we introduce another techniques, because this is not, the precision is not really sufficient for our approach, okay?
I understand. We're so lucky that we met you and you said yes when we asked you to present, because as we look at the COVID information commons, it started with 32 awards, and we have over 10,000. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And then, we ask the PIs and the co-PIs of the NSF and NIH funded grants that we have in there to create a PI profile and provide DOIs and links to their websites. So we don't actually house the data, even though we're called a big data innovation hub. It's focused on innovation. We link to everybody else's, so we don't have to try to keep it all up to date when they change it or archive it or whatever they do. But we're thinking about how we can make this available longitudinally into the future. So when we first started looking at, the coronavirus, and I was looking for materials on the coronavirus, and I found like a book from like 1987 from Springer or something. I'm like, finally, I found something, but not a lot of information in it, mostly agendas of like the second biennial coronavirus workshop funded by NSF. I'm like, you funded a coronavirus workshop in the 1980s? Where can I find the data? And I feel like it's our responsibility to actually try to document this as much as we can so it can be available in the future. So, for any of you and all of you, that's one of the things we're thinking about at the KIC. I'm also thinking about maybe we create a Springer book series. I publish with Springer now regarding security and privacy and the Internet of Things. We're also looking at kind of bottling what we have and doing a snapshot of the database every like 6 months maybe, and putting it in Dryad, which is an option too. And the system architect actually for the KIC works at Dryad too. So these are some of the things we're thinking about. And so I'd love to keep in touch with you to see if we might be able to collaborate on some of that.
Absolutely. So one of the most important results in our project was the question answering interface, because it's
Right.
able to combine all this knowledge. As you said, all the data is sparse across the world. So we need to normalize using the ontology or whatever other approach to provide a unified answer. So absolutely, we will in the future work together.
Yes, we will. This is very exciting, very cool. And
Thank
since
you,
you're,
Florence.
thank you very much. And since you're in Spain, but it looks like you created Drugs, the website in English. Is it in English or is it in Spanish or?
The website is in English, but also we are providing the platform in Spanish because
Okay.
the language model is oriented to Spanish. The normalization is also in Spanish, so we need to
Okay.
transfer some piece, some elements in the process.
That's perfect for us because we actually have quite a large Spanish-speaking population that works with the hub. The hub has over 8,400 people around the planet that we engage
Yeah.
with, you know, and over 4,400 students in our student data course. So that's great for us. So I'm super excited. So that's really cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Florence.
Niu, during your presentation, I was thinking about, you know, all the reporting and comments, very similar to what you reported about the schools where they let the kids go to school, like in the rural communities, you know, and they only locked them down for 2 weeks, let's say, maybe on the low end or the average end, whereas a lot of the US just had them stay home. And I think about the reporting about Europe, how in Europe they were like, no, you have to go to school, like by and large is what I heard. So how do you see that impacting? And it's not that you can tell, you know, the good news is in data science, we just predict, but we know we don't know yet. But how do you think that's going to impact actually the recovery from the science education or overall education for the US in general, the rural schools, and compared to like other areas like Europe? Do you have any comments or thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I may not be able to answer all of the questions, but I'll give it a try. So because like you said, you know, right now there's so much unknown. There's just simply too much that we don't know about yet. And earlier this year, OECD did some work, and then they were looking at the pandemic impact from a global perspective. And it's just so fascinating that US turned out to be more of an outlier. So looking at the other OECD countries, so if you look at the impact on test scores, in some countries it's really minimal, and in some countries there's virtually no impact. But in the US, you know, I think recently there was another very, you know, large scale national study being done saying, you know, actually things are a lot worse than we thought. And we've seen some, you know, the pandemic basically wiped out like nearly 20 years of educational progress. And then with that context, I think California itself was a unique outlier because in California, most of the schools, it was actually one of the states that reopened, you know, the last. And most of the students actually spend the entire 2020-21 school year online. And we know that, you know, because a lot of students, some 40% of the Latino students, they don't even have access to reliable internet and also computer devices. And for those students, you know, learning is just really minimal. And at the same time, you know, it's not just about academics because COVID-19 also fueled a national mental health crisis. So we're actually dealing with, you know, a dual, you know, pandemic. So I think just taking all of this into consideration, and also given what we already know about some of the district responses and also strategies, it probably will be a pretty long recovery. And right now, recently, just a couple of weeks ago, there has been some data from other states. They were showing the recovery. It's actually the pace. If you look at the speed and also the scale, none of this is actually near what we're hoping to see. So the other thing is the Congress provided about nearly $200 billion to help students recover, but the money is going to drain out next year. So coupled with all of this, I think, you know, it is looking like, you know, a pretty long recovery, and there's just too much unknown. And I think there's a lot of discussion about, you know, the equity implications, because we don't want to see some kind of a K-shaped recovery where some students are just, you know, are doing really well, but some of the low performing students continue to struggle. So again, I think there's just too much we don't know yet, but I hope, you know, I hope, with all of the work from the governments, from districts, from schools, and also from researchers, we can try to accelerate some of the learning progress.
I totally agree. Well, I'm super impressed that you have so much of this knowledge in your head and you're looking at it from so many different perspectives, and that you're working on seeing what we can do to help them, because there's a lot to worry about, as it is our country compared to other countries who have 5-year technology plans because all their leaders are technologists and scientists, engineers, and we don't have that so much here in this country. I look at how, slow we are, sometimes compared to some of the other countries. And so there's a lot for us to do. So I'm hoping we find some accelerants in an intellectual and educational perspective. So we look forward to continuing to work with you on that too.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you. And then Hong, I don't know that everybody knows about the PIPs. I love the way we call them the PIPs though, right? Gladys Knight and the PIPs. But so for those not from the US, the PIPs are Predictive Intelligence for Pandemic Prevention, right? Is that the name of the solicitation? And so that's great that you have one of the PIPs. And as you said, I think they're going to be centers or something that I think they're looking for next. I'm very impressed with your trustworthy AI focus, your multidisciplinary focus, your focus on minority serving institutions and underserved communities. It's very inclusive what you're doing, very impressive. And I'm wondering how you see this work proceeding into the future, and impacting those different groups and this very multidisciplinary group you have, the lawyers, the policy people, the technologists, you're a computer scientist, there are domain people. I'm wondering how you see this progressing into the future.
I wish I have a crystal ball. I don't. Things are progressing very fast, at least in the AI from the technology perspective. And some of the potential of LLM and a potential application in legal policy, data mining, general writing and education, it's certainly uncharted, and the potential risks a lot, but I would like also think potential reward is probably also a lot. It is probably a prudent way to have so many perspectives while we are planning or designing things in a proactive way, instead of a retroactive way or reactive way. So for having all the views from different perspectives, different community, different discipline, is probably required or essential to move forward. I don't think I gave the answer you wish for.
Oh yeah, I wasn't wishing for anything. I prefer, I'm a scientist. I like the facts, and the range of uncertainty that you see. And so I guess what I'd like to say too is that the Northeast Hub and all of our hub family, there are multiple of us, but the Northeast Hub, we have over 8,400 people we engage with. We have over 4,400 students we engage with. So if there's anything we can do to help you on the community engagement side, we'd be happy to chat about it and see what we can do to help you. So just let us know. And you met some really cool public policy people today who were speaking. So you have new friends there too.
Yeah. So Florence, maybe we can talk after I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Columbia probably will send the PRTB phase 2 application. At least someone will send. But I'm not sure whether your platform can be a partner in a separate application like the one I'm sending.
Yeah, the Big Data Hub can, provide a letter of support. We can collaborate with you. We started as the Northeast Big Data Hub. And we all stayed in our swim lanes, as they say. I don't like swim lane. I know, but now, it's like now we play water polo all over the world. And so, we actually serve only half of the 8,400 members in the hub, the Northeast Hub, are in the Northeast US. The rest of them are around the country and actually in 60 other countries around the world. So we're very broad in what we do. So I'm not limited at all. And we're headquartered at Columbia, but we're totally funded by the NSF and NIH funding at this point. So yeah, we'd be happy to collaborate with you. Nobody has told me I can't. So I would love to do that. So let's definitely let me know when you want to chat about it based on what you're doing. Just send me an email. I'd love to connect.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
Thank you.
at least connect, talk about the potential. Yeah.
That would
I'll
be,
definitely follow up. Yeah.
that's wonderful. Thank you for asking. Yeah, we'd love to help.
Yeah.
As you could tell, we really care what this COVID Information Commons we're doing. And I'm really happy to hear that you're doing the homework that we should have done since 1987 to prepare for COVID. Now you're helping us do the homework for the future. I'm like, get your homework done ahead of time type of person. So I'm really glad to hear you're doing the homework to help us into the future. And that's what a lot of this is. So we'd love to help.
Thank you. I will definitely follow. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And Evelyn, very exciting. It's always great to hear from a perspective from South Africa. And it was so good to hear Hong talking about having colleagues in South Africa too, when he presented just before you, which was very cool. And so somebody asked, how would you use the research that you did to make recommendations for future economic or social policy or for the fintech community, either, in South Africa or more broadly, whatever you think is appropriate? How do you think we could leverage the insights that you gained in the future?
Thank you so much, Florence. I would simply say maybe we'll need to use more of the advanced machine learning techniques, as I indicated late on my recommendations for future studies, and try to check what's happening in other stock markets, not necessarily in Africa per se, but your Australian Stock Exchange, New York Stock Exchange, and other stock markets in other different continents, and try to use your gradient boosting and other techniques. So maybe we can see the perfect results and try to take this forward.
That's a really good recommendation. What I keep thinking too about data science and AI and ML is that it's going to keep evolving and we're going to get new techniques. Like, we tend to say, I'm an aerospace engineer by training, like we were data scientists. It was all about the data. We had to capture data, figure out what it meant, try to make assumptions and move forward. Now we have so many new tools and techniques, and that's going to keep evolving. So I think that's great advice that let's look at more advanced machine learning techniques and the ones that we get in the future. So I'll be interested, since hopefully we can keep in touch. We love keep in touch with the students that work with us at the Hub and the KIC, that we can hear your future thoughts on that too, as more tools and techniques become available. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Jin, a couple of questions for you. There you are. Hi. So what surprised you most about your research findings, and what, based on your research, would you like to investigate further that you think would bring even more insights to the fore?
You are talking about like what's the future?
Yeah, like what
what's the
surprised you? What surprised you about your research findings? Like when you looked at your research, you were like, yeah, we don't have
like
a lot
the
of tests.
current.
Yeah, the current, like, well, okay, there's not a lot of test data, so of course we can't learn a lot. We need a lot more context to get better insight. But what is it that, is there anything that surprised you about your findings? And what would you like to investigate in the future to be able to help us get even more, leverage out of what we know, or create recommendations more strongly, to help us in the future?
Yeah. The main part of my research now is can be very useful at the early stage of novel infectious disease. So it can leverage the limited testing data by incorporating some extra physical information. And one thing I want to mention particularly is that because all the data, all the factors are already ready and available publicly, and there are many factors associated with a general infectious disease. So all this data and all these factors can be extended to future pandemics and other regions, because what we are using, what's the groups we are utilizing, that all this data can be found across the entire US. So it can be extended to other regions and other pandemics. And in addition, I think because we are highly relying on the physically informed model, it can help us to project the transmission patterns, to project everything despite the limited data. And all these associated factors, I think there are also many researchers are researching like what type of factors are highly associated with the spread of infectious diseases. I think this type of research is still undergoing, and there are many emergent or many other researchers are doing that. And by incorporating like many other highly associated factors, we can incorporate many other factors into the model and update the model, and to better characterize the patterns as well. I think that's a two main promising directions and promising results and findings of my research. Yes.
Well, that's fabulous. I'm so glad to hear we can use it in so many other ways. And I'm really happy that you're continuing your research and your PhD program now, which is really wonderful. So this has been fascinating as always. I always learn and we always make new friends, which is great. And we can work together into the future. All of these Lauren will take all the webinar and then break this up into the little lightning talks, and they'll be posted as well separately. So people can, if you have a following and a lot of fans, they can go watch yours. We'll also be transcribing and translating them, into English and Spanish, and you'll have the opportunity for them to be placed in the Columbia Academic Commons as well with a DOI, with the digital object identifier, which is really a nice way to bottle this up for you too. And so, thank you, Hong. And so, Lauren, I'd like to pass it back to you and thank you for managing this entire event. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Florence, and thank you to all of our speakers and all of our attendees today. We're so thrilled that you were able to join us in the middle of summer vacation. COVID never ends, and so neither do we. But please be in touch with all of us. We will be sending around information about our next KIC webinar, which should be in October, so please keep an eye out. But also please be in touch with us. We're always happy to collaborate and to facilitate your research. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a-
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.